I don't know exactly what I'm doing.
Good afternoon. This session is titled Building a Relationship with a University Press. After some short intros, we're going to organize our comments around three basic themes. The themes are behind the scenes, so we're going to discuss kind of how we interact with authors and also manuscripts kind of between the contract stage and the production stage. The second theme is common points of misunderstanding, and then the third theme is what is helpful to us. We'd like to hear from you during the presentation, so if you have questions, you don't need to wait till the end. Just feel free to raise your hand. We do want to get to the common points of misunderstanding portion, so if you feel like we're getting behind, we might suspend questions until we catch up. I am Michael Roux, the Marketing and Sales Manager at the University of Illinois Press. I've been here for 13 and a half years. I worked in independent music marketing for about 20 years until 2005 when I became the Publicity Manager. In 2012 I became the Marketing Manager, and then in 2016 I took on some Sales Manager's duties. I supervise a staff of 7 in the marketing department, and then we also have 5 University of Illinois students currently who are working part-time as interns in the department.
I'm Gernenz. I'm the Publicity Manager at the University of Illinois Press. I've been the Publicity Manager for about 2 years. Before that, when I was an undergrad, I was an intern in the marketing department. I have also worked as a bookseller for 5 years, and I worked in a library as well.
My name's Dustin Hunter. I've been at the University Press now for about 7 years. Worked for a trade publisher here in town as well for about another 7 or 8 years, plus some work as a graduate student doing cover design and interior design for books. Probably designed over 1,000 covers easily, but mainly I work directly with authors regarding the covers, their art programs that they have for the interior of books. Also work with other designers, collaborating with them, and also marketing and printers as well in final product produced.
My name is Jennifer Comeau. I'm one of 4 Jennifers of the press, so 10% of our staff I'm the editorial design and production manager at the University of Illinois Press. I've been at the press for a little over 10 years. It is my 4th university press, so I've moved around from university press to university press. It's not too uncommon in this field. And so I'm going to get our slideshow started. So we're kind of going to go through the sequence in which things happen once you're out of the acquisition stage so we'll kind of talk in order. So when we're working with a manuscript, there's a lot of things that we do behind the scenes that where the authors don't necessarily know that anyone in that department is involved. We'll get acquainted with the manuscript when it's going through peer review. We might ask the acquisitions editor to pass along certain suggestions for global changes, such as reducing substantive notes, dealing with the documentation, and so forth. Dustin or someone in the design staff will assess the proposed illustrations to make sure it's going to work for us. They're going to work for us. The production folks will estimate how long the book is likely to be and what the printing costs would be, depending on how many copies we're thinking we might print. We also want to learn, and this flow chart is messy, and it's got a lot of detail that's left out of the larger process flow chart. But basically, it shows, I've highlighted the places where the authors get involved. So this shows you all the other things that are going on around that. So one of the things we're also doing is we're finding out, before it even comes to us, learning about some of the unusual features a manuscript might have. So for example, I should choose formulas, foreign language, especially languages using a different writing system. That's good to know about in advance because we need to make sure that it's going to translate properly to our systems so that we have the right stuff in the book. We recently did a book that had Hebrew in it, and getting it to set right to left when everything else was left to right was a challenge with composition. It's helpful to know about that going in. Also, there are some books that a lot of books are straightforward. It's text, maybe with some headings and an occasional piece of art. But then there are other books that are going to have different elements that need to be designed, as sidebars and pull quotes and special types of charts or maps. So we're learning about all of these unusual features before the authors even learn their names. Then it's going to go, but then we have everything is signed off, the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and we've got all the permissions are in, all the art is in, all the art has been reviewed, the peer review's done, the revisions in response to peer review are done, and then it cuts to our department. So we will, somebody in-house is going to look at the manuscript and evaluate the mechanics and the prose, including spelling, grammar, voice. Is it casual voice, or is it formal, or is it mixed? Is it a distinctive voice, or is it just very straightforward prose? So we use those characteristics to determine what level of editing we want to ask for. And we'll also do some things to kind of regularize the files and tag things so that when it goes into composition and design, it can move quickly. We choose a copy editor. So one of the things that was a surprise to me initially when I first started editing 23 years ago, was that most presses don't edit books in-house. It's really common to have freelance editors. And that's valuable because you can have manuscripts in a variety of fields with a variety of characteristics. And getting copy editors can really work with this type of manuscript and this type and this type and this type and this type when they're all happening at the same time. In-house staff, it's really hard to do that. We'll set the editing schedule, and then we'll contact the author. So here's our first author point of contact. And we'll tell the author, here's the schedule, and here's the process for the next few months. This is what we're doing on the book. The copy editor, who is a freelancer, will read the entire manuscript and make changes and suggest improvements in Microsoft Word using tracked changes. They're looking for, mechanical correctness, grammatical correctness. That's straightforward. Consistency is the way this author treats numbers consistent in the book. Are terms capitalized or lowercase consistent? Clarity is valuable. Is your message clearly communicated to the reader? And then sometimes we will also ask editors to look at conciseness and narrative flow. So some authors can be very, very wordy, and we might want to say, let's pull that back a little bit. So who do you think has the final say about copy editing changes? Anyone?
Good time.
Hmm?
Good time. Good time.
The time? Time does play a role. So do you think that authors have the final say, or the copy editors going to impose it? Usually it's authors, but it's going to depend. So if it's a matter of grammar or spelling or something that's got a straightforward rule, we're not going to publish an ungrammatical sentence generally. We're not going to allow spelling errors that we've noticed to go in the book. But there are different ways to spell things. So, and there are different voices might have different types of grammar. You might have an informal voice where you have contractions, and that's fine for the manuscript. And in other cases, it won't be so much. But generally, the wording is the author's choice, as long as it doesn't break a rule. So the author is going to get the manuscript from the copy editor, go through all the changes the copy editor suggested, and make their own changes, and make decisions about the copy editor's suggestions. The copy editor then finalizes everything, goes to the project editor, who does some more file cleanup, and then sends it on to production. And then the design for the inside of the book is either chosen or created. Some books, we have some template designs, or other presses call them format designs, where you say, this is the font and this is the number of characters per line, and you can kind of put the book into that formula and go. Other times, books need individual attention. Then the book gets laid out by our in-house compositors, and then the page proof goes to the author and the proofreader at the same time. And then this is also when the indexing happens. It is the author's responsibility to either do the index or hire the indexer. You heard, if you were here earlier, you heard some good sales on why you should hire an indexer. Some authors don't necessarily think of their material in the same kind of organized fashion. They're thinking globally. An indexer is trying to compress this information into a small space and organize it so that readers can find what they're looking for. The project editor that in-house will review and merge the two sets of proof corrections we get back and edit the index. And then there are multiple rounds of proof at this point. So the editor will mark changes, the compositor will make changes, the editor will make sure the changes were made properly. There are things that we double and triple check. Does the table of contents accurately reflect the contents of the book? You'd be surprised. So all these rounds, the author doesn't have to get involved. Unless something comes up where suddenly somebody notices what might be an error, and then we'll contact the author. Then it goes to the printer, and we check the printer's proof, and then we send a copy to the author. So the author's gotten involved in two spots. One is reviewing the copy editing, and one is proofreading and either indexing or overseeing the index. But we're in the background doing all this other work.
So early on, even during the acquisition stage, you'd probably be in contact with somebody in the design department looking over your art program. So that's one of the first things that you would be in contact as an author with my department would be to overview and take a look at images that are in your book, whether they're charts, graphs, that kind of thing. I think there's a slide up there now that kind of shows on the, I guess it would be your left, an image that was submitted really early, and it was just a thumbnail size. And the author thought, oh, we can deal with that, right? You know? So author has to go back and try to track down a better quality image that will be suitable. A lot of times we get things that are just pulled off the internet, and more than likely those are too small. So you're going to have to either drop those or replace them. But working with your acquisition editor and somebody like me would be the one that kind of looks at those things. Also at this stage, I'm starting to kind of think about your cover for your book. Nothing usually is started formally for several months, but we're starting to look at the images that are in your book, starting to research and do some different ideas there. But the information that you give to your acquisitions editor is very important because that's kind of the starting point for the basis of your cover. Designers usually take those ideas and use them as a starting point. But a lot of times they're doing their own research on images, fonts, colors, but we would like to hear what the author wants. Our goal is to make everybody happy, but that's not always the case. So your designer that's doing your cover might contact you with questions, but most likely they're going to be starting off with that information they get from the acquisitions editor. At that point, a designer approximately designs, it could be 3 to 10 different options, basically, and then our department narrows that down to about 3 to 5 options, and we show that to a internal cover committee, which is made up of the director, that's the marketing manager, as well as the designer, and also the acquisitions editor that acquired your book, and they're kind of your liaison for your cover, and they're your voice. That committee then decides which cover would be best. After that, that cover gets submitted to you as the author. Sometimes we submit 1, sometimes we submit 2, and give a choice. But just by show of hands, I'd like to do a little vote here. Right? Who has the final say on what your cover should actually be? If you think it is the author, raise your hand. If you think it's the publisher, raise your hand. Okay, so it's pretty split right now. So I would like you all to have sympathy for me. Show those covers to you. As the designers, we're kind of the middle people, all right? We kind of get stuck. So the one thing I encourage authors is to be flexible, okay? I've had covers where I've had an author, and we didn't bring it today, but tell me, I don't want pink on my cover. So what do? We make the whole cover pink, and we show it, and she loves it. So just as authors, sometimes you don't know what you want until you see it. And that's okay. That's our job as designers, is to kind of make everyone happy as possible. So some presses, though, don't give any say to the author as, they have any say in the matter of what their cover looks like. At our press, I can only kind of speak, and I'll preface all this with, I'm kind of going by what we do. Other presses do things differently. So these are kind of our general practices, but for the most part, I like to give authors what I call kind of like a veto power, where if they have a good reason as to why that cover doesn't work, then of course we'll go back to the drawing board and we're going to listen to those ideas and thoughts. I've heard several authors of ours say that they appreciate that about our press because not all presses and publishers give that ability or power to them. But once everybody's happy, then we go on to the next stage, which is gathering cover permissions. This can be kind of a sticky area depending upon what image or illustration is used for your book. It is a different process altogether from getting the permissions for the interior of the book, because we do need promotional rights and publicity rights to be able to market your book. But at our press, your first interaction with your cover designer will probably be when you see that first cover option. You may not talk to them until then. So always be aware that the cover at this point is not final. The cover is never final. The book's never final, until it goes to the printer.
So the first time the marketing department typically interacts with an author's book is right around the contract stage. There is a packet that circulates to me that includes a description of the book, table of contents, usually sample writing, peer reviews, and it's up to members of the marketing department to provide recommendations on a variety of things. So we make recommendations on how we plan to position the book. Do we look at it as a sort of general reader trade book? Is it a more scholarly book that we might see has crossover potential, might get into bookstores or generate some publicity? Is it a book that's meant for the classroom or course adoption? Or is it a book that really is a scholarly monograph that we will target to academic libraries? So we kind of try to make those suggestions early. We make recommendations on what sort of binding it's going to be published in first, hardcover only, paperback only, simultaneous, hardcover and paperback. The hardcover is targeted to academic libraries at a higher price, but the paperback is available in a more affordable format for consumers or students. We comment on the length. We usually see a character count, word count, and generally speaking, the longer the book, the more it costs to produce. The more it costs to produce, the higher the price we have to give it. And from the marketing standpoint, we would like to price books for the most part as low as possible because it makes it easier for us to sell those books. We talk about timing of publication. So we publish in sports history. And if we're doing a book on history of football, we would like that book to come out close to the beginning of the football season because publications are doing reviews of new football books, and that gives us the best chance of getting that book reviewed. If we're doing books on the Olympics, we're trying to kind of line that up around the Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics if we have a choice, 6 months either way. Kind of the last thing I want to comment on is we make recommendations on titles, and I would say that 95% of the projects that we acquire, the titles change between the kind of proposal stage and the final publication stage. And I'm also going to take a poll. Who thinks the publisher should have the final say? Who thinks the author should have the final say? So who thinks the publisher should have the final say on titles? Who thinks the author should have final say on titles? So I agree that with the folks that said author should have the final say, especially in the kind of university press ecosystem. The author is going to be the most enthusiastic advocate for the book. It's theirs. We want them to love it, and we want them to promote it enthusiastically. And so, if we have sort of forced the title on the author, I think we feel that they won't promote it as aggressively, and also might sort of harm the future relationship between the author and the press. I do want to sort of give an example of how a title has changed from the kind of early stages of the process to the final book. It's a project that first came to us or the marketing department first saw it in 2014 by author Shawande Mustaqim. And the title that was on the packet that I received, this is the actual packet. The title was Roux of Terror, Gender, Health, and Power in the World of Slavery at Sea. And I'm going to read a couple sentences from the description. Studies of the Middle Passage and the transatlantic slave trade often focus on the land-based history of the slave trade to the neglect of the seaborne experience of bondage. In Roux of Terror, Shawande Mustaqim enforces that the experience of being enslaved began at sea. So we like the title Roux of Terror. That's a good title. But we felt like there was a better main title sort of hidden at the end of the subtitle, and that was Slavery at Sea. And so we made a suggestion, working with the acquisitions editor, who liaised with the author. We came up with the final title, Slavery at Sea, Terror, Sex, and Sickness in the Middle Passage, which I feel like everybody is happy with. This book has done very well, not necessarily because of the title, but I feel like this is an instance where the marketing department's suggestion to use slavery at sea benefited. I also want to observe, and I've not talked to the designer about this, but the designer for the cover, Jenny Fisher, is as part of the University of Illinois staff, and I feel like I love this cover. This is a great cover, and I think that the cover that she would have done for the book called Routes of Terror would have been different than the cover she did for Symposium. Not that it wouldn't have been as great, but know that the book title can profoundly impact what the book cover is going to look like.
So as publicity manager, my job is to send out review copies. So that's finished copies to academic journals, and then also, depending on the book, if it has more of a crossover audience or a trade audience, I'll send out advances for it. I help arrange interviews with video and podcasts, occasionally on TV. And I also promote our books on social media and provide support in setting up author events. So when it comes to being kind of behind the scenes work, all the stuff about looking at projects that Michael mentioned, I'm also involved in, so I won't repeat his comments. So what I also do is we have something that's called a launch meeting. We do this seasonally. And everyone in marketing kind of puts together their plan for the book. And then we meet with the acquisition editor and we talk about it and share information. So my part of that is to craft a publicity plan. And you, the author, would have been sent a marketing questionnaire that asks you tons of questions and cannot emphasize enough how important it is to fill those out in detail, and they are so helpful for us. And so what I would ask you is to give me suggestions of what are the most important academic journals to send your book to. And if you have any other suggestions, feel free to put those in there as well. And so I create my publicity plan using those suggestions and then also my own expertise in research ideas. I also travel to New York, DC, and Chicago, and I meet with book review editors at high-profile publications like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Booklist, Library Journal, and I pitch them our trade and crossover titles. And then, like I mentioned before, I print advances for those trade and crossover titles, and I'll send those to long lead time publications, which, if you aren't familiar with that term, it just means that we have to send, for certain publications, we have to send them books at least 4 months in advance, otherwise they won't consider reviewing it. When it comes to getting in touch with the author, it kind of depends. If I have questions for the author, or if the author has questions for me, I can be in contact with authors as early as 6 to 4 months before publication. And then upon publication, I send the author a formal email announcing that their book is here, the publication date, and I pass along some marketing information as well. And then from there on out, I intend to be the main point of contact for authors in the marketing department. A lot of what you are doing pertains to me, so it's helpful for information to kind of flow through me. So then I can help amplify your efforts and not direct anything else to the companies.
Now we're going to address some common points of misunderstanding. And I will start with the sort of editorial side of things. One, copy editors are fact checkers. No, they're not. The content of the book, the facts and information in the book, are the author's responsibility, although the peer review process also is supposed to be looking at that content. But if you have a year wrong, the likelihood that a copy editor is going to notice it is very low, and they're attending to so many facets of the manuscript that we can't pay them enough to also check all the facts. So if you think you need a fact checker, that's a whole different process. Next one is, I don't like this change the copy editor suggested, so I'm just going to say, so the best response is just put it back the way it was. Usually copy editors don't make suggestions for no reason. They may or may not explain their reason, because after a while, if they explain their reason for every change, it's exhausting for the copy editor and the author, believe me. So if you don't like a particular change that a copy editor suggested for a sentence or a paragraph, keep in mind that the copy editor was trying to address some problem. And see if you can find a different way to solve the problem. If it's not clear to you what the problem is, the copy editor is usually happy to answer that, to explain what the problem is, or your in-house project editor. If you call and say, hey, I'm not quite sure why the copy editor is making these changes in this chapter, we might be able to figure it out pretty quickly just from looking at, okay, well, this sentence has a dangler, or this sentence seems to contradict what you just said, or this pronoun does not have a clear antecedent. So a lot of times there is a straightforward reason, and you may not be spelling it out every time, but you can assume that there is a reason behind it, and don't just say, hey, put it back the way it was. Indexing. I can just use my computer to index the book, right? An index is not the same as a concordance. So if you have lots of page numbers without any kind of subtopics, most readers are not going to look up all of those page numbers. It ends up being defeatist. And you'll see one of the entries here has PhD student and doctoral student, as if they were different. That's a case where those were synonyms, and you probably want an entry in your index for doctoral student, see PhD candidate, or vice versa. But then within that, you have to say, what angle of this topic am I addressing where in the book? It's not just all one. Okay, every time I mention this, then it's just going to be a list in the list of page numbers. So trying to do automated indexing, that doesn't work. Rewriting and page proof, really best to avoid for a bunch of reasons. But one, really, you have the peer review process. There's been a lot of rewriting. The copy editing process, there is rewriting. But once you get page proof, if you start making changes, every time you make a change, there's a chance of introducing a new error. And if you make changes that affect pagination, that indexing work you're doing is suddenly in trouble. So we really discourage rewriting and page proof, which is not to say that if you see a sentence and go, oh, I used the wrong word here, or I've made a factual mistake, by all means correct it. But it's not something to do lightly. Finally, these rules or guidelines don't apply to my book because the index is probably the best example of this, where my field is so complex that I really can't do sub-entries in the index, or something like that. So, we are publishers, we deal with lots of books. We have an understanding of how books best serve readers, and that's, thinking that, well, this rule doesn't apply to me, really have a conversation. Don't just decide it doesn't apply to you and ignore it.
When it comes to some misunderstandings with when it comes to like you're working with a designer or specifically like art program, which is kind of very early on, we're looking at and evaluating art. We aren't looking at it necessarily from a content standpoint. So if somebody, a designer, comes and says, we can't use that image, it's not because we don't like the image, it's because the image just is not big enough, it's not large enough. We're looking at it strictly from facts, like the image is too small to use in print versus how it's being used online, for example. We're also looking at charts and graphs, which I think we do have a slide to kind of explain this a little bit. But a lot of times we get charts that are in Word documents that are colored, and they look great. But when you convert those to black and white, they don't look so well. For one, the legends and everything that works with that particular chart are obsolete because everything looks black. There's just not a lot to differentiate when it comes to charts and graphs, so we have to figure out alternative methods when displaying those if we're going to keep them. And sometimes that requires redrawing them and making them work better. When it comes to some of the art, a lot of the common things that I see a lot is authors will submit art that's too small, and we will reply back saying we need to get a larger version or a better quality version that will work for print. A lot of times what I see happen is, I only know this from experience, is that authors will take it in Photoshop and enlarge it. And in theory that sounds like it might work, but really that kind of destroys your image altogether, and it ends up being kind of a muddy mess. And so those are some common things when it comes to art program. When it comes to the cover, as authors, you kind of have a lot of input on how your cover should look, but according to the vote we took earlier, ultimately it's up to the publisher to kind of make that final decision. Many times our ideas sound good when we're talking about them, but when it comes to put the pen to the paper, things don't always work out exactly the way we imagine. So be flexible. Also remember that the particular designer that's working on your cover isn't just working on your cover. They're working on 20 plus other covers. And at our press, that's how we kind of operate. A designer could be working on 20 covers, and it could be all in different various stages, from working on your front cover to your back cover to the spine. There's lots of different areas that a cover could be at different stages. So be patient with your designers. One other point that I wanted to kind of mention was, I'll try to summarize this as best as possible, is that a lot of times authors want to add their personal preferences to a cover. A designer is looking at your cover based upon the content of the book. And they're going by their research into looking into really fine details of your book and kind of pulling out different aspects. They're looking at the best way to make a cover that will reach an audience that you are trying to go after. And so that's what we're looking to try to do, is to cause a reader to pick up the book, not necessarily explain the whole book on the front cover. So a lot of times the best covers are ones that are very simple, that get your message across. Another thing designers are looking at is the purchase point. So more and more books are being purchased digitally or online. So designers aren't just looking, how's your book going to look in your hand? They're looking at how your book looks online, how it looks on Amazon, or how it looks in these other forms that you're book cover is going to be displayed. So keep that in mind as well.
So I have three quick points of misunderstanding. One, I learned from a couple of University of Illinois faculty authors who didn't publish with us but sort of expressed this when I was prepping for a previous session like this, is they were hesitant to contact their publisher. And I guess generally we want to hear from authors. We want to learn what your expectations are for us marketing the book. That's why we send a marketing questionnaire. If you have questions about the process, we want to know that. We want to help answer those questions. So I guess, again, not all presses are the same, but from interacting with other marketing managers, in the Association of University Presses, I feel like they are all open to hearing from authors. So don't be afraid to reach out to them. And I guess I'm speaking from the point where the book is out, and you're kind of wondering what happens now. Ask the question, what happens now? Because we're here to answer those questions. The second point of misunderstanding is sort of the role of a bookstore as it relates to events. We have authors who contact us and say, I'd like you to set up an event for me at Politics and Prose Bookstore in Washington, D.C., which is one of the kind of premier independent bookstores in the United States. And, I think the author's expectation is this bookstore has great foot traffic, great mailing list, and if they can get plugged into that kind of network, it will help sell the book. The bookstore is looking at it from the other side. The bookstore is counting on the author to bring in colleagues, friends, family members to the bookstore event. And so if we contact the bookstore and ask them to schedule an author, they'll often ask us, can you guarantee 30 people will come to the event? Can you guarantee that 15 of those 30 people will buy the book? Can you, for the author, pull in one or two sponsors for the event that are sort of outside the bookstore, so the sponsor will send out notices to their mailing list. So just be aware, and the bookstores will also contact us and ask us to maybe spend $50 to $250 in advertising money to promote the event. So be aware that the bookstores are looking at it differently than the authors when it comes to that. And the third one is, I guess it's going to come off as a defense of the marketing department or projection or something, but I guess I feel like the point of misunderstanding is that the marketing department is filled with business school bean counters who all we care about is just, sales and don't really have interest in engaging with people. If we make suggestions, we do it because we care. Because, we think we have an idea and we think it will actually help connect you to an audience that's important to you. Our marketing department, I sort of feel like we are like you, the author. We have a member of our marketing department that has written 2 books for 2 different university presses. A member of our marketing department used to be the managing editor at another Big Ten press. We have a member of the marketing department that was in the library school, another one that was in the English department. And so we just happen to be the people at the press whose task it is to help connect you with a larger audience. So if you're able to, and I'm not suggesting that everybody feels that way, but if you can orient your thinking in that way and use us as a resource, and if you make a suggestion and it doesn't stick around, tell us. And we don't get everything right, but we do make recommendations with care and just don't you understand.
So one common point of misunderstanding I'd like to address is that you start publicizing a book when it's published. The time to start thinking about promoting your book is right after you submit the final manuscript and when it goes into production. And hopefully you've been thinking about promoting your book or your work as an academic even before then. And when your book goes into production, that's when I start thinking about promoting it, and that's what you should do. A question that I have gotten a few times is, can you send my book to Oprah? Or can you send my book to Michelle Obama? And my answer to that is, like, do you have their address? I would love that. But for people like that, like, so high above, we are starting from the same point. And I don't have any way to contact them. But what I try to emphasize in my offers is it's going to be a lot more valuable if we send a copy of your book to influencers in your field. So give me a list of 5 names, and if you think that they might talk about your book on social media, we just want them to be aware of it, I'll send them a book. That's just speaking for me, and I don't know how the publishers operate, but that's my take. And then another thing I get questions about sometimes, it's been 3 months, why isn't my book received any academic journal reviews? And most journals take 6 to 18 months to review a book. And I regularly get reviews for books that are over 4 years old. So patience is something I would like to stress. Journals, there's so many books published, and they can get behind when things happen. So bear that in mind.
Anybody have any questions so far?
I was wondering when Dustin said about the design for digital and paper, if the book will be published in the both platforms, you think the design should think like one sign that will be good in the both formats, or will be done a design for the paper and a design for the digital reading?
So we don't necessarily have a lot of say in how the ebooks get designed because there's so many different platforms. Some of our books where the layout and design are really important, we'll do a fixed format PDF. So we'll basically, what you'll get as an ebook is photographs of the pages, essentially. But for other books, it will get converted to whatever the basic design is for that platform. I'd say 10 to 15% of our sales right now are in ebooks.
Last year was
17%, okay, so it has gone up in the last few years.
Thank you. Heather, I did a butcher last name. I have a question for you. You mentioned sending books to the trade or crossover journals, and I've been learning, as I've started learning about publishing, there's trade books and scholarly books, and they belong in different universes, and never the twain shall meet. So I'm just curious as to how often you send some of the universal press books to trade or crossover journals, and is there any criteria that you look for in making that decision?
So it depends on who the book is about, how it's written. If there's a lot of jargon or the writing is very dense, sending a book, like a more scholarly monograph, to the New York Times Book Review it's kind of just like throwing it in the trash. Books that are written with a mind to a general reader, or just not even like an intellectual person. So to give an example, we have this book, it's about to come out, I just received advanced copies for it today, it's very exciting, called The Taco Truck. And it's about taco trucks and how they navigate urban space. And there hasn't been a book like them. It's written for an academic audience, but we think a book like that could have some interest in the general population just because of the topic. So I'll be sending a book like that to places like Booklist, Library Journal, because public libraries might want to bring something like that in. I'll send it to New York Times. When I met with the Wall Street Journal in December, they asked me to send a copy of the book to them. So I'm pretty generous and pretty willing to try for a lot of our books. I would say, I can't give a percentage, but I send out quite a few advances. We have more crossover titles than trade titles. I'd say we have like 4 or 5 trade, and then maybe like 10 crossover titles a season. So I would send out advances for all of those.
I just wanted to piggyback on that as it relates to the taco truck. So at the same time Heather was pitching that book to a variety of media outlets, I was pitching it to our sales reps and also Barnes & Noble. And when I met with the Barnes & Noble buyer, I was expecting her to, I was hoping that she would buy some. I thought if she bought some, she'd probably take 25 to 50 to kind of cover the community of Columbus, Ohio, which is one of the places where the research takes place, and some other geographic places. And she ended up buying like 250 copies to spread out on a much wider swath of stores. So I think Heather was enthusiastic going in from a publicity standpoint that it might get some media attention. I thought Barnes & Noble would take some, and they ended up taking a lot more than I expected. So sometimes those crossover scholarly titles, it's hard to tell. It depends on the buyer. If the buyer knows what other books are coming out, or how it's going to fit into their store, or certain marketing programs. And so I was very pleased that they were interested in taking that many crossover title.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about what's helpful to us. So one of the things that you can do for editing is think about the structure of your book. Does it make logical sense? Are there things that are the levels of organization correct? Are they parallel? Do chapter titles seem like they belong in the same book? Do all chapter titles explain what your chapter's about? And this is a weird one for people who haven't thought about it before, but there's the chapter title and there's the chapter subtitle. And sometimes people put the main topic of the chapter in the title, and sometimes they put it in the subtitle. Well, one of those is going to have to become the running head for that chapter. And so if we have a chapter title that is very vague, some chapter titles are very vague, and then that's the running head, it's going to be hard for readers to kind of cement where they are in the book. So we will, we'll look at nitpicky stuff like that. So another thing that you can do for us is to be really careful with your citations during the research and writing stage. I, after 22 years in the industry, am still stunned sometimes by the errors in citations. The title's wrong. The author's name is wrong. The date of publication is wrong. The publisher is wrong. The publisher, the title in the notes doesn't match the title in the bibliography. And I've known instances where in the author's early research, the author was consulting dissertations and articles, and later the books that they had researched on, or the topics they had researched on, came out in books, and so they updated the bibliography, but they didn't update the notes. So, taking care there, and this is another place where copy editors are not fact checkers comes in. I do ask copy editors to look up anything that seems weird, but they're not going to catch everything by any means. I apologize for the title on the left, Why Academic Writing Stinks and How to Fix It. That's, obviously a kind of an intentionally provocative title. This was published by the Chronicle of Higher Education, I think. Yeah, okay. So if you haven't read it, I actually do recommend it. It's fairly short, and there's some other pieces that are published in conjunction with it. If your topic is academic, we don't expect you to dumb it down so that an 8th grader could understand it. But we do suggest that rather than speaking to the 12 people who are also the same level of expertise on the topic as you will understand it. But so maybe that 80 people who know a little bit about the topic can access it. You know, it's not that every book has to be written for the general reader, but the more people can understand your book, the more chance it has of getting an audience. So, you know, writing with that in mind can be really helpful. Brian Garner writes, he's written a chapter that's in the latest edition of the Chicago Manual of Style on grammar, and he has a few books, including Garner's Modern English Usage. He is really good about helping you understand the difference between different terms and how they're used, and also about not being pretentious in your writing. So we know you're smart. It's going to be obvious that you've got the credentials, but writing is a place to show off your expertise in your subject to as many people as you can. Be comfortable asking questions and working collaboratively. If you don't understand why somebody is trying to make these changes to your manuscript, ask. We can have a conversation. We can troubleshoot together. I have been on the phone troubleshooting sentences with authors in books that I didn't even copy edit. But, you know, it's, well, there's this issue and I don't want to do this. So, you know, really, we can work collaboratively, and the copy editing process is heavily collaborative. That said, recognize that we have a common purpose. We all want the best for your book. We want your book to be the best it can be and to reach as many people as it can. But we do have different levels of expertise. You're the subject area expert, and you know the copy editors know about grammar and communication and rhetoric, and their expertise is valuable too. They're not trying to stomp all over your voice. The best copy editors work with your voice. Not everybody can do that well. And, you know, we do recognize that, but there is expertise there. We respect and acknowledge your expertise and ask that you do the same. And then make your schedules.
When it comes to things that are helpful to us, I just have a couple of little things. When it comes to images in your book, we ask that you get the best quality as possible. I know sometimes these images are pretty expensive, but I've had a few instances where I get images to look at and the watermark's still on it, or something's on there protecting it from off the internet. So there's things on there that just to make sure that you get the best ones and be organized as possible when it comes to those images. Another thing is to, and it's kind of been hinted at along this whole panel, was to ask questions and ask them early. If you wait until the book's about ready to be laid out and we're still having to figure out, is this image going to be in the book or is it not going to make it? It's better to find that out early in the process as opposed to waiting longer down the line. And I know this was mentioned earlier with another panel, but from my standpoint, avoid having friends and family design your covers. Right? So it can be a sticking point. It's on multiple levels. I've seen it go really good, and I've seen it go really bad where people don't talk to each other anymore. So I just encourage to have an outside person design the cover. It's just better overall. So that's all I have.
So what's helpful to us in the marketing department, I guess I want to echo something that Jennifer said, which is an openness to our expertise across the press. A lot of us in the marketing department have been doing, either working at the press for a long period of time or have worked in similar marketing efforts for a long period of time. Again, we're not always going to get it right, but you know, we do have good ideas, and the request is that you remain open to those. Connect us with your networks. That's very important. You know, whether it's social media or field of study, or, you know, a roommate that you had long ago in college that's now the editor at Slate Magazine. You know, all of those networks and contacts are very important to help us, you know, reach the largest audience as possible for your book. And then the third one is have realistic expectations. We talk a lot about managing author expectations, just so you know. And it, you know, kind of goes along with what Heather said. You know, when we see a marketing questionnaire, you know, in the media section for a very scholarly book, and all of the suggested media outlets are PBS and NPR and Oprah, you know, it's good for us because we learn early on what the author expects, but it also is an opportunity for us to reach out and help guide the author in a different direction as far as the kind of publications that they are suggesting that we reach out to. You know, it's on us to you know, kind of help you understand what we're capable of and how we can best help you reach your audience.
So for me, what's really helpful, I kind of talked about this earlier, but what's really helpful for me is that you are very thorough on your marketing questionnaire, especially when it comes to academic journals. It's my job at the press to be more of an expert in trade media, and I really rely on my authors to tell me what the best journals are to send their book to. Not that I don't know what the best journals in the field are, but we publish in a lot of different fields, and if your book touches on a sort of niche topic and there happens to be a niche journal that would be perfect for, make sure you tell me, because that's going to be more visible to you than it is going to be to me. Another thing that's really helpful is communication. We want to hear from our authors, and it's really helpful to marketing and authors communicate what they're doing to promote the book, because we can help amplify your efforts. So if you're doing any events, tell me. We will put them on our calendar, we will promote them on social media, and depending on if it's a bookstore, I might send out some media copies to local media in the area, and I'll let them know about the event. Events are a really good peg to get publicity around. If you did an interview, let me know that as well. We can link that interview on your book page on the website, and also tweet it out as well. And also, it's really important for a publisher to know, I want to know every little piece of media that the book has received. We use that information to help guide future publishing decisions as well. So knowing that this book got however many interviews is really helpful for us when going further if we have a book on a similar topic, because we can know, oh, we know these people are interested in this type of thing. And then one thing, the most important thing, if you take anything away from this, is know that the best advocate for any book is its author. And the books that tend to do the best have authors that are active in promoting their book. The panel that was before this one, everyone kind of talking about how they promoted their book and their work. And as a publicist, those are my favorite types of authors to work with. because they're out there on the ground pushing their book in a way that I can't be. I can send books, I'll send books to whoever, but I am behind my desk in my office. You get to go out there and advocate for yourself.
The one book I'm looking at has a lot of photographs in it that can like photographs of ITO.
So now I can hear you. Just a second. I don't have it, it's over here. Oh, sorry.
Like, I guess I'm the word.
The one book I'm working on has a lot of photographs in it, and they're all my photographs, and I understand about the quality. Is that an issue?
It can be. It depends on, like we do a lot of film books too. And film books are notorious for this, where the image quality is very low because everything's on a screen. But there are workarounds to be able to get those to work. I'm not sure about your book, personal photographs. If you have actual hard copies, those can be sent in to most publishers and they can scan them in as well and get them to look better. But I don't know if that was answering your question or not.
I would say also that if the photos you take are high resolution and are not like snapshot style, then you could be in a better situation than a lot of authors because you're not going to have to go get permissions. Except if you have subjects, and I don't know if Ruth Nicole, I think is still here, but her book has a child on the cover. And children on covers, for illustrations inside the book, it's okay in some cases, but on the cover, you have to be really careful about putting an identifiable child, and so, then there are photo releases to deal with. But if they're mostly your photos and they mostly don't have, things that need permission, then you, as long as they're high resolution, that could be a really good thing. Anybody else? Questions?
But this is not academic, I can talk about it. Maybe not. Okay, so when it comes to the final approval of the content of the book, I'm not talking academic press, but this happened to a friend of mine where she gave them the changes and they didn't implement all of them. And they did put it to press. I mean, it did go to print with obvious errors that she had even pointed out. That's a press problem, wouldn't you say, rather than an author problem?
Yeah, presumably, yes. I mean, I
know none of us know all the circumstances, including me.
I mean, there are.
It's a commercial situation.
It's a commercial situation. If you think in terms of, Lori talked earlier about the level of investment the press has in the book.
Right.
And one of the things that I talked about was rewriting page proof. And so we have authors who will send in a handful of corrections in page proof, and then they'll notice later, oh wait, I got this one detail wrong. I need to change this. I said Nigeria or I meant Kenya, or I said 1836 or I meant 1826. So there's a small factual correction that they introduce later. Then we've had authors who will send in a list of 120 corrections when the book's about to go to print. And
I said that.
because working with the corrections is going to take at least two people are going to be doing work, and some of the corrections might seem to be optional. The author decided, I don't want to use this word twice on the same page, which is, it's just a matter of preference or, some rule that their high school English teacher told them. So you know, when we're dealing with a long list of corrections, we're having to make judgment calls. And I can't speak to anybody else's judgment calls, but, you know, there may well be they may have been overwhelmed, or they may have come too late in the process. You know, if the book's already at the printer, it has to be really egregious for us to change it. So, that's.
I'm not sure if this is the right place to raise this or if it was in earlier, but could you speak a bit to, let's say, two authors working together on a book and some of the challenges and strengths in terms of style and consistency and things like that?
I would say that different voices in a book are fine. There are some books where it's co-authored and basically this author takes these chapters and the other author takes these other chapters. But I think in the best cases, they read each other's chapters and they try to work together towards something of common authorial voice. And then in the process of copy editing and proofreading and so forth, you know, if they're willing to collaborate more closely together, you're going to be much better off. Some authors will divide up responsibilities and say, okay, you know, this person reviews the copy editing, and the other person reviews the proof, or reads the page proof and does the index, or you know, whatever. But in terms of voice, you know, really reading each other's material and trying to get towards something that is reasonably coherent and cohesive is good.
And just from a marketing standpoint, I know to the marketing department, we prefer, if there are multiple editors, to have one editor or author sort of collate all of the suggested information and provide that to us. We had a book recently that had 3 editors, and they wanted to be copied on all the correspondence. And you know, if we were trying to set up an event, we'd send out you know, are you available in this time period? And all 3 of them would write back with sort of different dates and times available without talking to each other. It was difficult to put that information together. Julie, I think you indicated that we're about out of time. Okay. Make sure you stick around for the keynote address.